Welcome back inside our SI.com studios for this week's video mailbag, where we take your questions via email and the Twitter using the hashtag Mannix Mailbag. Question number 1, with the number 7 and number 8 teams in flux, what East teams do you think grabbed the last 2 playoff spots? Well, I'll tell you, I think Brooklyn is going to be one of those 2 teams, because if you look at the schedule, the Nets have the most favorable one. Through Sunday, they've got 10 games left at home and 4 games on the road. And statistically speaking, they have the easiest schedule the rest of the way. The head-to-head matchups are going to be critical, but the Nets are in the driver's seat because of the favorability of their schedule. The second team I'm leaning towards is Miami, if for no other reason than right now, they've got a couple of game cushion on everybody else. The Heat have a comparable schedule as the rest of the teams in the mix in terms of home and road games and strength of schedule, but that cushion, coupled with their experience, I think that gives them the edge. Charlotte's got a chance. They've got some head-to-head matchups left. And I think Boston has the most heart of any teams out there, but the Celtics have been so banged up over the last couple of weeks, I just don't think they have enough players on the roster to get them through to the postseason. Question number 2, should Milwaukee have kept Brandon Knight and lost him in the offseason, but possibly get to round 2 of the playoffs, or is MCW's future more important? Look, if you're asking me, is Brandon Knight worth just a trip to the second round of the playoffs and then possibly losing him in the offseason? No, you need a guy to build around for the future, and I'm not convinced yet that the Bucks would not have matched a significant contract for Knight if it came to that. All that being said, I'm a pretty big fan of Michael Carter-Williams, and I think I'm one of the few people out there that really thought the Bucks made a decent deal at the trade deadline. Carter-Williams is shooting the ball horribly, especially from the three-point line in his short time in Milwaukee, but I do think a player of his size, about 6'6", and his potential, playing for a coach like Jason Kidd, could have a higher ceiling than someone like Brandon Knight. It's not a knock on Brandon Knight, it's just that if Michael Carter-Williams pans out the way I think he could turn out to be a better player in the long term than what Brandon Knight is. Question number 3, will the Bulls trade Doug McDermott next season since Nikola Mirotic is getting better? What could they get? Well, it makes no sense to trade Doug McDermott at this point. Doug McDermott's only in his first year, he's still learning the ropes, he's still learning how to play the NBA game, and he's playing for a coach in Tom Thibodeau that demands defensive excellence. If the Bulls were to trade him this offseason, they probably wouldn't get much back in return. Plus, with Mike Dunleavy headed to free agency this summer, there is going to be a need for depth at the small forward position. I think the Bulls have a bright future with the small forward spot because Mirotic and McDermott are a nice 1-2 combination, especially offensively. Certainly both players have to improve defensively, and McDermott has to get used to the physicality of the NBA game, but I still like his potential. I still think he can bring some offensive firepower off the bench, and he's a good prospect that the Bulls should not trade at this point. Question number 4, what is the criteria for choosing NBA MVP? If Russell Westbrook were to win, would it be a first for a 7th, 8th seeded team? Oh good, another MVP question that involves Russell Westbrook. We seem to be obsessed with this topic. Look, I love Russell Westbrook, and if I had to vote for the MVP of the second half of the season, he would win it hands down. What he's done in the Western Conference in carrying this Thunder team towards a playoff spot with so many injuries ravaging this team is nothing short of remarkable. He has really evolved into one of the top 5 players in the NBA and should get all the credit in the world for that. Moreover, the 7th, 8th seed factor is in play here. Since the late 1980s, and I've mentioned this stat before, every MVP has come from a team that's finished first or second in their respective conferences. That is going to give Steph Curry a leg up and certainly be a factor for James Harden. What will also be a factor is the fact that Harden has really carried this Rockets team in Dwight Howard's absence up the rankings in the Western Conference. It is going to be a brutally close vote, don't get me wrong. But for my money and my vote, it's going to go to either Steph Curry or James Harden because of what they've done for the entirety of the season. That's it for this week's video mailbag. Remember, you can get your questions in via email or on Twitter using the hashtag Mannix Mailbag.